There's no doubt that one of the hardest parts about storytelling is finding the right one to tell. And though there are literally thousands of stories out there to choose from, finding one with a new and exciting angle is the main ingredient to making your documentary great.
Though you may already have a compelling subject for a documentary, finding where the best and most intriguing story lies can sometimes seem difficult and fleeting. However, there are some important factors which can help you to quickly determine which story to tell in your documentary. These factors include limitations like location access, budget, resources, and time, as well as research such as looking at existing projects and determining audience type and story timeliness.
Our world is full of limitations. From forces of nature to distance and time, the world has many factors that limit what we can do. In the same way, documentaries also have limitations such as access to location, budget, resources, and time that every documentarian needs to consider. Even so, with a strong will and smart decision making, almost any limitation can be overcome.
The first limitation to consider is whether or not you'll be able to get access to locations in which the story needs to be told. In the documentary Encounters at the End of the World, director Werner Herzog attempts to capture the strange life and beauty of people living in one of the coldest places on Earth, Antarctica. Now for some, going to Antarctica would be too expensive and logistically difficult. However, with persistence and a friendly relationship with those in charge of granting permission for this location, Werner Herzog was able to realize his dream of capturing activities at the end of the world. At the same time, not having access to locations can actually become part of the story as well. In the documentary The Cove, director Luis Simoio shows how his group of activists are denied access to the beaches of Taiji, where fishermen are catching and killing dolphins. This denial helps the director to give the audience a sense of wrongdoing on the part of the fishing business and sets up the main tension for the story.
Another important limitation to look at is the amount of money that can be raised for the budget. Documentaries such as Earth, which is sponsored by both the Discovery Channel and the BBC, have large budgets that allow them to get great footage of the animals they're featuring, as well as an excellent narrator and musical score to intensify the emotion of the activities on screen. However, great documentaries can even be made on small budgets. The documentary Surfwise was made for very little money, due to the amount of stock video and pictures that were available to its director. By using the stock footage, the director was able to get the most out of what he had.
Picture, audio, and video resources are another important limitation to be aware of in documentary storytelling. For Ken Burns' documentary, The Civil War, Burns ran into a problem of not having enough pictures to represent the writers who were featured in the series. As a result, he was forced to sometimes use pictures of anonymous people to represent the writers. A huge advantage that Ken Burns had was that most of his pictures were copyright-free. In reality, many archival resources can be protected and end up costing you a lot of money. As such, it is always a good idea to make sure that you include extra money in the budget for stock resources.
The last limitation to consider is if you have the required amount of time to make a documentary. As an example, Spellbound, a documentary that follows a number of contestants as they make their way to the National Spelling Bee, would take a long time to shoot and edit, as the time it takes to go from local to National Spelling Bee takes several months and requires a lot of footage to cover. Whereas a documentary like Capturing the Freedmans uses archival footage of a family to tell the story, and as such does not take nearly as much time to gather.
One of the first things any documentarian should do is be aware of the documentaries that are similar to the subject they hope to capture. If there are none, the documentary has a good chance of getting funded. If there are some, it is still possible to look at the event or subject differently, and thus have an original story to tell. For instance, the story of Timothy Treadwell and Grizzly Man had already been told by various news organizations, and even in a previous documentary. However, the director of the film, Werner Herzog, told a different story about Treadwell, where he focused more on Treadwell's personality rather than his tragic end.
Another factor of great importance is to decide who your audience is going to be. A documentary that is shown on public television will be going out to a vastly different audience than one shown in film festivals. As such, deciding on an audience type can shape the pacing, music, interview subjects, and message of your documentary.
Lastly, it's also a good idea to make sure that your documentary can be done in a timely manner that will keep your subject relevant. Some subjects, such as those found in most of Ken Burns' historical films, aren't under time constraints. However, contemporary topics such as those found in standard operating procedure require a faster completion before the subject becomes out of date in your audience's mind. If you want to be more meticulous about facts in your documentary and don't want to feel rushed, it may be better to pick a story that doesn't lose relevancy over time.
Finding your story in a documentary can be just as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. Nonetheless, by knowing your limitations and deciding on some research factors, you can limit your possibilities to just a few captivating options.